What you're about to witness has not been approved by the Super Earth Ministry of Truth. If you want to go on dying for a cause you don't understand, carry on in ignorance. But if the lives of your friends lost on the shores of Malevolent Creek mean anything to you, you will listen to what I have to say. You will honour their memories by learning the true history of your flag, drenched in blood, the real history of Super Earth and the Helldivers. We start in the 21st century. Over those all-important decades of progression, the human race evolved tremendously, developing new technologies in the mid to late 21st century that were seen as unfathomable 20 years prior. Creating but not perfecting faster-than-light travel in the 2040s, we sought to reach beyond our own solar system, finding out exactly what loomed behind the stars. But fear of the unknown can be crippling, and after discovering what they feared the most, the humans of the day were merciless. A bug-like alien species given the name of Terminid was first to make contact. Technologically primitive but evolutionarily resilient, these space cockroaches were incredibly hardy but docile by nature. Humanity needn't have breached the passive acceptance of their existence by the bugs, but of course we did, unable to fathom the idea that something perceived as foreign, alien and monstrous in appearance could continue to exist without acting as some sort of threat to our developing way of life. You see, in spite of all that technological progress enabling real space exploration, humanity had continued to violently feud amongst itself throughout most of the years prior. As nations developed, so did their weapons. Little is publicly chronicled regarding the last Great War, famous for unifying humanity under the new One World government and Super Earth flag. But what's undoubtedly true is that vast swathes of culture and language were assimilated and eroded in its aftermath. Previous nation-states like Great Britain and Ireland, as well as sections of what was once Canada and Russia, are now deemed inhospitable wastelands, a lasting testament to the sheer destruction the war wrought on the planet, now sold as a utopian bastion within the solar system by the Super Earth government. Amongst the ranks of the victors of this war was a group of military elite who functioned as both riot police in suppressing initial protests aimed at the unification of Super Earth, and functional assassins who could deal with leading dissident opposition fatally. The Super Earth Legion, as they'd later be named, were not pure patriots like the modern Helldivers. They were pragmatists who aimed to back the right horse, fighting in the land grabs that followed the war until Super Earth was truly formed. Under this new flag, now worshipped and sacrosanct like the gods of the old Earth, politics changed forever. A new system known as managed democracy was held up by the still-living global politicians as a great new leveler for humanity. A computer-aided voting system was established, a program created to pose questions taken from the galactic wide web to a prospective voter in order to establish their core values and societal preferences, casting their vote automatically and supposedly democratically, as this removed the cult of personality from politics. But it also allowed those with power and wealth to covertly spread their messages globally, rife with misinformation and emotive manipulation. Under it, the fake news of yesteryear are today's home truths. Your views expressed exactly as you conceive them, or exactly as they were conceived for you. A complete illusion of control. Speak up against it? Abstain? You'd be facing a charge of treason, your communications online monitored and tracked under the guise of paternalism. Judged by the Super Earth Ministry of Truth and hunted by the Super Earth Legion, who would benefit from the power rift post-war and risen to the forefront of the new Super Earth military. The people still remembered the old Earth back then though, and spoke up against the regime in their numbers, especially as they began to leave Super Earth behind and populate the newly discovered planets across the galaxy. Some believed it was an opportunity to regain self-determination, but as the newly formed socialist government of Northman's Creek soon found out, after digging in and attempting to secede from the Federation of Super Earth, this was now a Herculean task. To counteract any defensible stronghold and make full use of their vast super destroyer fleet, the Super Earth scientists had just invented a new technology, capable of breaking through planetary atmospheres at extreme velocities, absorbing the shock and protecting their cargo, the Hellpod, which housed none other than 50 founding members of the Super Earth Legion, giving them the new, more fitting title of Helldivers, as they dropped directly into the Northman's Creek Parliament building and eradicated everyone inside. The escapades of these Helldivers became legendary back on Super Earth as true defenders of managed democracy, a reputation that would only be strengthened during the 40-year conflict with the Terminids, in part prompted by the discovery of this new aerial warfare approach that made interplanetary invasions and defences actually possible. the war against the bugs turned out to be a stroke of accidental genius. That, or it was callously planned this way from the start. You see, the bugs were found to be natural, renewable sources of a substance known as E710, a fossil fuel equivalent with properties akin to old world oil. Their planets, as a result of millions of years worth of habitation, were also rich in this fuel, which could be pumped and extracted to whichever human colonies required it. Under the facade of liberty, this was quite literally a resource war, except the resources could fight for themselves. However, not every human was willing to blindly accept this new status quo. Some broke away more permanently than the belligerents on Northman's Creek, setting up a new homeworld on the frozen fringe planet of Cyberstan. The cyborgs, biological humans who dedicated themselves to mechanical evolution just as fervently as the Super-Earth loyalists did to their flag. They aim to transcend the human condition via mechanical enhancements, perverting the skin but successfully differentiating themselves from their pure human counterparts. Decades into the human war with the bugs, the cyborgs broke away from Super-Earth officially, declaring their sovereignty and socialist ideals, calling the Super-Earth ministries for what they were, a sham built on lies. Despite their enhancements, the cyborgs didn't have the technological firepower to tackle Super-Earth head-on, even whilst they were distracted by the bugs. Instead, they opted for guerrilla tactics and underground operations on the home planets, disrupting their most pivotal supply chains with minimal human casualties, attempting to wake mankind up to their manipulation. But the Super-Earth propaganda machine is unrivaled. Stories emerged of tortured humans, forced into mechanical augmentations and set upon Super-Earth against their wills, longing for death at the hands of their ex-countrymen. The cyborg small-scale acts in the low-populous districts of Super-Earth were branded as mass terrorism, with civilian casualties being exaggerated by a factor of 1,000. From this point, large-scale conflict with the cyborgs was inevitable, as the pure humans were set on a warpath against them, soon invading their homeworlds with the might of the Helldiver army. But all of those warfaring developments were also being closely monitored by another faction who the human race were bound to eventually stumble upon after the advent of faster-than-light-speed travel. The Squith, a bipedal alien race with more in common with Homo sapiens than the Terminids before them, had been observed watching Super-Earth from afar for many years at the start of the wars. The name humanity gave to them was the Illuminate, an immediate display of the inferiority complex they held towards the species from first contact. Despite the Squith's initial peace offerings, as soon as Super-Earth caught wind of their obliterator bombs, weapons of mass destruction that exceeded humanity's own, the peace was waived in favour of a war on 3 fronts. Logic dictates declaring war on a more technologically advanced military is unwise, which begs the question as to whether the Squith were ever willing to use the bombs. Even so, self-preservation was the justification the Super-Earth government chose to use. Anyone who tolerated the Squith or recognised their more advanced, constructive and peaceful nature was publicly executed for treason, if you want any indication of the government's insecurity regarding this weak justification. But once more, the Patriots volunteered to cut the aliens down regardless, with Helldivers entering this battle just as enthusiastically as ever before. One by one, the armies fell, and Super-Earth reigned supreme, their fanatical Helldivers convinced to lay down their lives and protect humanity from threats of the government's own making. In 2084, the bugs fell first, suppressed and driven out of their home planets, and subjugated rather than eliminated because their very insides remained key to fuel the Super-Earth expansion. They were preserved, enslaved, and farmed, even back on the Super-Earth home planets. Obsessed with control, the poor cyborgs faced a similar humiliation. Cyberstan was conquered, its technology stripped and commandeered, whilst the cyborgs who once called this place a free home were democratized by force. Managed democracy in all its coercive glory was returned to all who remained, as Super-Earth was, of course, reinstated as their government of choice. The Squith's fall was the most disastrous of all for anyone opposing Super-Earth. They were forced to their knees, made to demilitarize and hand over their immense technological wealth to the victor. With it, Super-Earth became even more powerful, gaining access to the Illuminate's devices capable of planetary destruction, but with the resolve and moral disregard to actually use them. The arsenal of any future Helldiver was expanded tenfold as war was finally over and held at bay for the century to come. In its place, an uneasy, restricted peace was watched over by Helldivers who became glorified traffic officers back on Super-Earth, with limited combat to keep them sharp. but military aggression has always been pervasively present on Super-Earth, even over the 100 years of peace. Every citizen was issued with a fully functional bolt-action rifle when they turned 16, a rite of passage that gave them a taste of the military life that the government hoped they'd embrace should they need to sign on as Helldivers once more. And peace could never last living like this. First, the bugs managed to escape their farming stations on the Super-Earth home planet, ripping into the now unprepared human populace and repopulating worlds on the fringe of the galaxy at a rapid rate. In the chaos of the bugs uprising, the march of the automatons began. They bore a flag all too familiar to the children and veterans from the First Galactic War. Robots with a collective desire to wipe out Super-Earth, their intent to fight back towards Cyberstan, now little more than a mining planet on the outskirts of the galaxy, was further proof that the cyborgs had retained their grudge and evolved even further. With no biological components remaining, these pure robots still fought for old cyborg ideals, intent on freeing their progenitors on Cyberstan from Super-Earth control. But they didn't have the same limitations. They aren't bred, they're created, meaning humanity now faces down an even greater threat than they did 100 years prior. More importantly, the Helldivers who forged Super-Earth in fire and blood are long gone, as are the real heroes of the First Galactic War. General Brash, a supposed survivor, hasn't been seen in person in decades. Yet somehow the propaganda machine keeps on pumping. The recruitment process has been streamlined to tackle this new threat head on. Prospective Helldivers who've only known a false peace are poorly prepared for the new threats they'll face. On average, they're 18-year-olds, high on patriotism, low in combat readiness, sent to the slaughter after a cursory glance at their crippling contract of employment, and little more than basic training. Spilling the oil of a few remaining captive Terminids can prepare nobody for the ferocity of a real Helldive. But, driven by their zealous loyalty and sheer recruitment numbers, this new Helldiver Legion are still piloting super destroyers far and wide, carrying weapons and armour worth more than their very lives to the men back home, pulling the strings of yet another senseless war caused by the supposed virtues of managed democracy. And here we stand, in the modern era, with millions more innocents on all sides of this ceaseless war having already lost their lives. I will be chronicling every battle the Helldivers take on as they dive blindly into ruin and inevitably face down more and more threats from foes old and new. I don't see how a victor can be crowned at the end of it all, but I'm sure humanity's most loyal drones will fight without hesitation. Best of luck to you. Give them a nice cup of liberty from me before your bones turn to dust and they come to scrape up your cape and armour for the next poor fool. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.